Seth Rollins stood in the center of the ring at WWE Saturday Night Main Event 2025, arms stretched wide, the crowd split between cheers and confusion. He had just finished delivering a fiery monologue, another verbal bullet aimed directly at Roman Reigns. With Paul Heyman nowhere in sight and Seth declaring himself the new face of WWE, it felt like a coronation. Rollins was defiant, cocky, and proud. He had taken everything Roman once stood for and lit it on fire. And yet, something was off. Something in the air felt heavier than usual, like the calm before a superstorm. The arena lights dimmed, not by mistake, but by design, and suddenly, the Titantron flickered with static. Then, it happened, the screen went black for a breathless moment, and when the visuals returned, they showed a shadowy figure walking down a long corridor backstage. The camera cut closer. The audience gasped. Long leather coat. Limp in the left leg. Dirty blonde hair. And those eyes. Those haunting, tortured eyes. The ones that had been absent from WWE for years. The crowd exploded. The internet froze. Dean Ambrose was back, and he wasn't alone, because right behind him, walking like a general returning to the battlefield, was Roman Reigns. Silent. Stern. Eyes locked on the ring where Seth Rollins was now frozen in disbelief. The WWE Universe had witnessed shocking returns before. But this? This was betrayal wrapped in nostalgia. This was war. The camera cut back to Seth Rollins, who looked like he had just seen a ghost. The same man he once stood side by side with, the man who bled for him in the Shield, who took a steel chair to his back when Rollins turned on them, and who had vanished without a goodbye, was now walking toward him. But not as a friend. Not even as an enemy. As a weapon. Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns stood at the top of the ramp, shoulder to shoulder, not saying a word. They didn't need to. The silence was more powerful than any promo. Ambrose's head tilted slightly, a small smirk cracking through his stoic face. Roman crossed his arms. Seth Rollins, for the first time in years, had no words, and that's when it hit everyone in the arena and watching at home. The Shield hadn't been resurrected. It had been re-engineered into something darker. Something unholy. Backstage, chaos reigned. Paul Heyman was nowhere to be found. Seth's allies, Bronson Reed, Dominic Mysterio, and Austin Theory, stood frozen around a monitor, unsure of what this meant. Ambrose wasn't even supposed to be part of WWE anymore. His contract had been bought out. He had vanished into the void of wrestling obscurity, rumored to be done for good, but Roman Reigns had made the impossible happen. And not out of nostalgia. This was a calculated act of vengeance. A chess move made not in anger, but in cold, calculated blood, because Roman had been humiliated. He had been dethroned, betrayed by Heyman, mocked by Seth Rollins, and targeted by the new generation trying to erase his legacy. And if he was going to burn everything to the ground, he wasn't going to do it alone. He brought back the one man who didn't just break the rules, he never played by them to begin with. Dean Ambrose, the lunatic. The wild card. The man with nothing to lose. It wasn't just a return. It was a declaration of war. Inside the ring, Rollins finally moved, slowly lowering his mic. His smirk, the one fans had come to expect, was gone. This wasn't a scripted beatdown. This wasn't a surprise appearance to hype up WrestleMania. This was personal. Roman had been silent for months. But now he was speaking in actions. The two men descended the ramp together, slowly. The crowd roared, and phones lit up the arena like fireflies. Security didn't intervene. No referees ran down. WWE officials backstage were just as shocked as everyone else. The silence was deafening. Rollins backed into the ropes. Alone. Vulnerable. He had built an empire on the ashes of the Shield, and now the ghosts of that empire were here to collect. Ambrose climbed onto the apron first. He didn't take his eyes off Rollins. Roman paced around the ring like a wolf, eyes cold, calculating. Then, in perfect coordination, they both entered. Seth Rollins swung first. A wild, desperate punch. He connected with Ambrose, who didn't even flinch. Instead, he smiled, and then all hell broke loose. Ambrose tackled Rollins into the corner, unleashing years of suppressed fury. Punch after punch. Elbow after elbow. Roman waited. Watched. Studied. Until the moment was right. And when Seth tried to crawl out, Reigns speared him so hard the ring shook. The boos. The cheers. The stunned silence from the commentary table. It was all one beautiful storm, but this wasn't just an assault, this was a message. Roman picked up a mic from the floor. For the first time that night, he spoke. You betrayed the wrong family. The mic dropped with a thud. He and Ambrose stood tall over a broken Seth Rollins. Backstage, the dominoes began to fall. Factions were collapsing. Allegiances questioned. Twitter was in meltdown. Fans were chanting Shield. Shield, but this wasn't the Shield. Not the one we knew. This was something colder. Sharper. More dangerous. This was the New Order. In the locker room, JUSO, Roman's estranged cousin, sat watching in stunned silence. Cody Rhodes stared at a monitor, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Becky Lynch ran toward the trainer's room, her husband being stretchered out, and Dean Ambrose, he didn't say a word. Didn't offer an explanation. He didn't need to, because sometimes silence is the loudest scream. The moment Seth Rollins was stretchered out of the arena, his body broken and his spirit rattled, the foundation of WWE began to tremble beneath its very core. Fans weren't just reacting to a shocking attack. They were reacting to a seismic shift in the power structure of the company. Roman Reigns didn't just return. He returned with an army of ghosts. And the ghost standing by his side, Dean Ambrose, had re-entered the world of WWE like a dagger thrown through the heart of everything Seth Rollins built. Backstage, no one dared approach them. As Roman and Dean passed through the corridors, crew members stepped aside like shadows parting for a storm. The energy in the air was hostile. Heavy. Ambrose didn't make eye contact with anyone. He just walked with the same haunted stare he had the night the Shield first broke up. But this time, he wasn't alone in his pain. Roman walked next to him, not as a tribal chief, but as a brother reclaiming what had been taken from him. Camera crews scrambled to get reactions. The commentary team remained silent. And in the medical room, Becky Lynch held Seth's hand as trainers checked for broken ribs and a potential concussion. She whispered, "Why him? Why now?" But Seth had no answer. Only pain. And the bitter taste of betrayal burning in his mouth. Just 1 hour earlier, Seth Rollins had declared himself the face of the new WWE. He claimed that Roman Reigns was done. That Paul Heyman had moved on. That the Shield was nothing more than a relic buried in the sands of time. And then the relic stood up and fought back. Paul Heyman, who hadn't been seen all night, finally appeared on camera, pale, breathless, looking like he had just seen a ghost. He refused to speak. Refused to even answer who knew what. But everyone could see the fear in his eyes. Heyman wasn't just caught off guard. He was terrified. Because he knew better than anyone, Roman Reigns doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. And when he strikes, he makes sure the world feels it. As the dust settled, speculation turned into feverish theorizing. When had Dean Ambrose returned? Was this a long plan orchestrated behind WWE's back? Had Roman crossed company lines to bring Ambrose back from exile? Was this even legal? The questions echoed across the WWE Universe, but the answers remained locked behind the silent glare of two men who said nothing, because they didn't need to. The betrayal cut deep for Rollins. For years, he had lived with the consequences of turning on the Shield. He wore it as a badge of honor, as a symbol of his ambition. But tonight, that past returned to haunt him in the form of a man who had every reason to never come back. Dean Ambrose had once vowed he'd never return to WWE. He called it toxic. He buried his name. And yet, something, or someone, had convinced him to dig it all up and walk back into the lion's den. That someone was Roman Reigns, but why? because Seth had gone too far, because Seth had mocked the legacy Roman built, because the man who called himself a visionary failed to see the storm coming, and because Roman needed a monster to help him burn everything down. The next morning, headlines flooded every outlet. Ambrose returns. Reigns declares war on Rollins. WWE in chaos after Shield reunion turns violent. The Shield reborn, or rewritten? But even as the world screamed for answers, Roman and Dean offered only one response: silence and devastation. Cody Rhodes, interviewed backstage, looked visibly shaken. "I've fought Roman. I've fought Seth. But this is something else. That's not the Shield. That's revenge wearing a familiar mask." And he was right, because what Roman had done wasn't about nostalgia. It wasn't about righting a wrong. It was about showing Seth Rollins, and the entire world, that the Roman Empire doesn't fall. It reloads. Backstage, Jey Uso paced alone in the hallway. He had been burned by Roman before. He had broken free of the Bloodline. But now he watched from the sidelines as Roman returned, not with Solo, not with Jimmy, but with Dean, and the look in Jey's eyes said it all. If Roman could bring back Ambrose, what else was he willing to do? Who else might return? Was this the start of a darker Shield? Or something far more dangerous? Meanwhile, Bronson Reed and Dominic Mysterio were left scrambling. The men Seth once led looked shaken. Their confidence fractured. Their leader taken out. And no one willing to face Roman and Dean in the ring. WWE officials quickly scheduled an emergency boardroom meeting. Rumors began swirling that Triple H had been blindsided by the return. That legal teams were now involved in negotiating Dean's new contract. Some claimed this was Roman's revenge not just on Seth, but on the company itself, for letting Paul Heyman walk away, for declaring him obsolete, and for letting Seth steal the spotlight. In the weeks leading up to this moment, Roman had been silent. No tweets. No press. No backstage sightings. People thought he was broken. Humiliated after WrestleMania. Abandoned by Heyman. Replaced by Solo Sikoa's rising faction. But what no one knew was that Roman wasn't gone. He was rebuilding. Plotting. Waiting for the perfect time to strike, and when the time came, he didn't just strike. He brought hell with him. Back in the ring, the camera panned to the blood-stained mat where Seth had fallen. Roman's final words echoed in slow-motion replays: "You betrayed the wrong family." And now, that family had a new face. Dean Ambrose. A man who had walked through fire, disappeared into the dark, and come back without forgiveness in his eyes. Whatever had happened during his absence, it had changed him. There was no trace of the unhinged, unshaven lunatic anymore. What stood beside Roman Reigns now was colder. Sharper. A soldier with one mission: finish what they started. The Shield wasn't back. It was reborn in fire. And Seth Rollins? He was now the target of the most dangerous alliance WWE has seen in over a decade. Would you like me to continue with the next 2,500 words? We'll go deeper into the aftermath, WrestleMania implications, Heyman's hidden role, and the question fans are now screaming: is Jon Moxley gone, or is Dean Ambrose just getting started? The days following WWE Saturday Night Main Event 2025 were unlike anything the company had experienced in years. The internet was still ablaze. Fans across the globe debated in disbelief: was this really Dean Ambrose? Or had Jon Moxley, the violent, unscripted brawler from AEW, been tamed, repackaged, and reborn under Roman Reigns' command? But those close to Roman knew the truth. He didn't just bring back Ambrose for shock value. He resurrected a weapon. While the WWE Universe kept talking about the return, Roman remained silent. No interviews. No tweets. No backstage updates. Not a single word. And yet his presence was everywhere. His face was plastered across every WWE social account. The Shield theme remixed into something darker played in every promo package. Ambrose's bloodshot eyes stared directly through the screen on every Monday and Friday night teaser. And Seth Rollins, gone. Medical reports confirmed what fans feared. 3 bruised ribs. A minor concussion. Ligament sprains from the spear. Seth would be off WWE television for at least 3 weeks, doctor's orders. But the damage wasn't just physical. Seth Rollins' pride had been shattered. He built an empire in Roman's absence, molded a faction of misfits and mercenaries to carry the company into a new era. And now, like a thief in the night, Roman had kicked down the door and torched everything he had built. In Seth's absence, Bronson Reed attempted to hold the faction together, but cracks quickly formed. Dominic Mysterio was nowhere to be seen. Rumors circulated that he wanted no part in this war anymore, especially not with Ambrose now roaming the halls. But while Seth nursed his wounds, Paul Heyman resurfaced. And he didn't look like the confident, calculating wise man fans had grown used to. He looked rattled. In a private backstage interview, no crowd, no camera crew, just one cameraman and a microphone, Heyman sat down for the first time since Ambrose's return. "I didn't sanction this," he said, eyes darting nervously. "I didn't know. Roman kept it from me." He took a breath. "But I should have known. That man plays a longer game than anyone. And when he plays it with people who aren't afraid to go too far." The interviewer leaned in, asking what everyone wanted to know: "Did you bring Ambrose back?" Heyman stared into the camera. "I didn't have to. Roman did what Roman always does. He makes everyone think he's out of moves, then plays the one you forgot existed." But there was something else in Heyman's voice: fear, because Heyman had aligned himself with Seth Rollins after leaving Roman. He thought the empire was crumbling. He thought the future was with Seth. And now, he realized just how wrong he was elsewhere. The Bloodline civil war continued to unravel. Solo Sikoa, who had declared himself the new tribal chief months ago, was silent. Jacob Fatu, Zilla Fatu, and Tama Tonga, all of whom had taken sides, were now watching Roman's movements carefully. If Roman and Ambrose were on a mission to reclaim dominance, no one was safe. Back in California, Seth Rollins posted a single message on social media: "You want war? You just got it." But deep down, he knew this wasn't just a war. This was a reckoning. Every decision he'd made since betraying the Shield was coming back to haunt him. He broke that brotherhood to climb to the top. Now, Roman had dragged Dean from the shadows to remind him what happens when you turn your back on family. The Shield wasn't about justice anymore, it was about retribution. Meanwhile, WWE management scrambled behind the scenes. Dean Ambrose's return had been kept so secret, not even half the creative team knew. It was Roman's doing from the beginning. Legal documents revealed he had been in talks with Ambrose for over 6 months, quietly, methodically, and completely off the books. Triple H, though stunned, couldn't deny the results. The ratings for Saturday Night Main Event had shattered records. Merchandise sales for all Shield-related items exploded overnight. But there was a deeper concern brewing inside WWE headquarters. What was Roman's endgame? He had Solo's faction on one side, Seth's wounded empire on another, and now, with Dean Ambrose by his side, Roman had created a third force, unpredictable, violent, and impossible to control. And worse, rumors had already begun to circulate that Roman wasn't done recruiting. Backstage whispers pointed to a name that chilled even the most hardened superstars: what if Roman brings back Bray Wyatt's legacy next? Some claimed Roman had been seen backstage speaking with Bo Dallas. Others said he had reached out to former NXT radicals. One thing was clear: Roman's new alliance was not built on loyalty. It was built on grudge, and for the first time in a decade, WWE felt truly unstable. The next SmackDown opened with eerie silence. No pyro. No crowd chants, just darkness. Then, one spotlight hit the ring. Roman Reigns walked out alone. No Ambrose. No Bloodline. No mic. He circled the ring like a predator. Then, slowly, he pulled a steel chair from under the apron. He placed it in the center of the ring and sat down. The camera zoomed in. His voice echoed through the arena. "Do you feel that, Seth?" he whispered. "That silence? That fear?" He stood up. "This isn't about belts anymore. It's not about Paul. It's not about the Shield." Then he leaned toward the camera. "This is about punishment." He dropped the mic. The lights cut out, and when they came back, Dean Ambrose was standing in the ring behind the chair, but the chair was on fire. A burning symbol of everything Seth Rollins had tried to bury that night. WWE confirmed it. SummerSlam 2025. Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose vs. Seth Rollins and a partner of his choosing. But who could Seth trust? Becky Lynch. Too personal? Cody Rhodes? Still battling solo? Kevin Owens? Injured? Drew McIntyre? Gone. And that's when one name started to float through the WWE locker room like wildfire. What if Seth brings back Moxley's last opponent? The fans didn't know who to cheer for anymore. Roman was a villain. But he was fighting with the brother Seth betrayed. Seth was a hero. But he was the one who started it all. Ambrose, he wasn't a hero or a villain. He was vengeance, and vengeance had just declared war. Would you like me to continue into the next 2,500 words, building toward the SummerSlam confrontation, surprise alliances, and the twisted emotional unraveling of all three men? The weeks leading to SummerSlam 2025 unfolded like chapters in a slow-burning tragedy, one laced with blood-soaked loyalty, buried grudges, and a promise of violence that could only end in total destruction. Every Monday and Friday night, the question echoed, who would Seth Rollins trust to stand by his side? Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose were already operating like warlords. They didn't just attack Seth. They started targeting anyone close to him. Bronson Reed was taken out with a backstage ambush. Security footage later leaked, showing Ambrose wrapping a chain around his fist and swinging without mercy. Dominic Mysterio? Found unconscious in the parking lot, a black baseball bat next to his limp body. No fingerprints. No witnesses. Just one message scrawled on the windshield: family means nothing if you sell your soul. And Seth, he was still healing, physically and emotionally. The ribs had mended, the concussion was gone, but the scars ran far deeper. He watched his empire fall apart piece by piece. He had been the architect, but now the blueprints were burning in Roman's hands. Then came a bombshell. A special edition of Raw was announced. Rollins responds, "Live." Fans held their breath. And when Seth finally returned to the ring, he looked different. Not physically, but emotionally. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't dancing. There were no flames. No flashy gear. He wore all black. A nod to the Shield, but stripped of pride. It was a uniform of mourning. He stood in the middle of the ring and looked straight into the camera. I deserve this. The crowd fell silent. I broke them first. Roman. Dean. The Shield. I destroyed something that was built on brotherhood. For what? A shot at glory? I became everything I once swore I'd never be. He paused, jaw tightening. Not to right a wrong. They've come back, not to teach me a lesson. They've come to finish me. He pointed at the screen. Roman, you want revenge? You brought back Ambrose. Good. Because I'm bringing someone back too. The arena exploded with anticipation, but Seth wasn't finished. You say I betrayed the wrong family. Well, maybe you did too. That night, backstage cameras caught glimpses of someone walking into the building in a black hoodie. The face was hidden. The footage was cut, and for a week, the WWE Universe lived in suspense. The internet boiled over with theories. Kevin Owens? Sami Zayn? Randy Orton? Was it Jon Moxley, again? But then came the reveal. 1 week before SummerSlam, Roman and Ambrose stood in the ring, ready for their final statement before the war. Ambrose leaned against the ropes, unblinking, while Roman smirked and held a mic. 7 years ago, we buried the Shield. You were the one who stabbed it, Seth. You were the one who let Paul Heyman whisper lies in your ear. You turned on your brothers and called it evolution. Roman stepped forward, his voice lower now, but what you did, broke something inside of Dean. Something I couldn't fix. And now I brought that piece back, to finish what you started. Just then, Seth's music hit, the crowd roared. He walked out slowly, holding his ribs, the pain still visible in every step. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a man no one expected, Shinsuke Nakamura. The WWE Universe exploded, the last man to defeat Dean Ambrose in a sanctioned singles match before Ambrose left wrestling entirely. The man who once stood against Roman Reigns at Survivor Series, nearly ending his Universal title reign. Seth leaned into the mic. "You wanted chaos, Roman? You brought back the past. I'm bringing someone who understands the future. Someone who knows how to end lunatics." Nakamura stepped forward, eyes locked on Ambrose, and in that moment, the war was real. SummerSlam was no longer about revenge. It was about survival. The final match card read like the end of an era: Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose vs Seth Rollins and Shinsuke Nakamura, unsanctioned tag war. No disqualifications. No countouts. No interference. Just 4 men. A ring. And history coming full circle. The night of SummerSlam arrived, the lights went black. A chilling remix of the Shield's theme echoed through the stadium. Slowed, distorted, broken. Out came Roman and Ambrose, through the crowd, dressed in tactical vests, faces unreadable. They didn't fist bump. They didn't smile. They didn't speak. They marched. Seth and Nakamura entered second. The crowd's roar was deafening. Seth still wore black, but this time, with streaks of gold. A symbol of who he was, and who he was trying to be again. The bell rang and the war began. It wasn't a wrestling match. It was a demolition. Chairs. Tables. Fists. The crowd was on their feet the entire time. Roman and Ambrose operated like a machine. Ambrose was feral, slamming Nakamura's head into exposed steel, laughing as he bled. Roman was precise, measured in every punch to Seth's already damaged ribs, but Seth wouldn't quit. He took the beating and then he got back up, and when Nakamura hit a Kinshasa that floored Roman, Seth took the moment to lock eyes with Ambrose. There were no words, just fire. They charged at each other, and time froze. The crowd watched as 2 brothers collided again. Years of rage, betrayal, heartbreak, released in punches, kicks, and screams. Seth hit a super kick. Ambrose laughed. Seth hit a curb stomp. Ambrose rolled through it, popped back up, and hit Dirty Deeds. 1.2. Nakamura barely broke the count. The match spiraled into chaos. Bodies flew. Tables shattered. Roman speared Nakamura through the barricade, and then came the end. Seth stood, barely breathing. Ambrose crawled toward him, laughing through blood. "Finish it," Dean whispered. Seth hesitated, then shook his head. "I'm not that guy anymore." But Roman was, from behind, spear. 1. 2.3. Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose stood tall, victorious but broken. The crowd didn't know what to feel. They cheered. They cried. They chanted, "Shield! Shield! Shield!" But this wasn't the Shield, this was a funeral. Roman raised Ambrose's arm, then left him in the ring, alone. No victory pose. No celebration, just a man, bleeding in the spotlight, laughing to himself. A ghost in the place he once called home. The days after SummerSlam 2025 felt like the world had gone eerily quiet. There were no extravagant victory promos from Roman Reigns. No post-match interviews from Dean Ambrose. No celebration photos on social media. WWE had just delivered one of the most emotionally devastating main events in years, and the silence that followed wasn't an oversight. It was intentional, because in that silence, the message was deafening. This wasn't over. Roman Reigns had gotten what he wanted. He stood tall with his hand raised. He made Seth Rollins bleed. He gave Dean Ambrose a platform to release years of suppressed rage. But in doing so, he also set something loose, something he could no longer control. For Dean Ambrose, the victory at SummerSlam wasn't closure, it was the spark. In the weeks that followed, Ambrose began showing up alone. Not with Roman. Not under anyone's banner. Just himself. Unpredictable. Untamed. Walking through crowds. Sitting in dark corners of the arena. Attacking people with no explanation. Carmelo Hayes. Ricochet. Finn Balor. Anyone who represented the new era that Dean claimed had forgotten what war tasted like. His promos, when he chose to speak, were more like confessions. "I came back to settle a score," he whispered.